So the function of the board this evening would be to approve, alter, or deny this motion with the conditions.
And to test my reading skills.
And to test your reading skills, which, may I say, you did quite well. Thank you very much. So with that, in the record, Mr. Eads and then Dr. Richard.
Thank you, President DeWitt. Just to
zero in on all of those words, state law allows but does not require some of the terms that are in the application to be in the resolution, and allows the board to place them in the resolution or to negotiate them in the contract, which is an additional time period. I believe it's 60 days if the board passes the resolution. This resolution basically includes the components from the application, which are the merger of the two schools into a single entity, and the elementary being the post-2004 rules for financing in state law, and the secondary being the pre-2004 financing rules that are currently in state law. It does leave the matter of the term to negotiations between the parties, and it's just worth pointing out that nobody gets to force anybody to do anything. Both sides have to agree on a contract that before it goes forward. So,
including our Board of Education.
Including the Board of Education and the Board of Union Colony Schools. So basically this resolution approves the merger and the financing terms, at least one of the financing terms, and but does not address the term and moves that to the contract negotiation.
So we're not deciding on the timeline today.
Well, state law allows you to, and if you choose to do that, we're ready to alter the resolution to include whatever other terms and conditions you wish to put in. So we're ready for that. So state law allows you to do that, doesn't require you to do it. So
just quick clarification, financing terms, you're referring to the formula for calculating the per pupil funding.
That's correct.
Per grade.
The 2004 changed the rules slightly for calculating per pupil
which
revenue.
Which is how we're operating today, as you're all aware. The 6th grade was moved into the post-2004 funding formula when we moved it over to the West Greeley campus.
It just codifies that. Right. Yeah. And it'll be repeated in the contract because it's one of the details that you have to have a clear understanding of. So,
Dr. Richard.
Well, let's go ahead with the 2004 and combining it as one charter. One of the questions that I have, and we may need to turn to Ms. Sponsler or to Mr. Eads, and I'm looking at liability for the district on this. The secondary, the 7 through 12, receives the pre-2004, which means that you receive at-risk funding based not on how many at-risk students you have, but the district's level of at-risk funding. And then the K through 6 is actually providing at-risk funding for the number of at-risk students that you have. What I'm asking about is if we agree to that within the contract, is there any chance that the state would look and say, well, it's a new contract, so we really can't be providing that level of funding for the secondary. They should also be having the amount of at-risk funding for the actual at-risk students, not for the district's level. And then we would be liable for, because it would be in a contract, to come up with that difference to pay that. So it's one of those, what's the district liability on this? Is that something we need to be concerned about?
Well, I had,
please, Mr. Eads,
so I have spoken to our attorney about this, and he believes we can put adequate terms in the contract to prevent that. I wouldn't say that we can guarantee there won't be some kind of future change either in state law that might affect that. In fact, we've seen that already with our charter contracts. We've had state law changes that negate portions of the existing contracts. So that could always happen, but our attorney believes that we can write adequate protections into the contracts.
Follow up at all on that? Or
Oh, well, on a different topic, but
okay.
go ahead.
Mr. Hafley's got his line. Thank you.
A couple things. First, Mr. Gilliam, I want to thank you first for your passion for your school for the course of your career. It's been a hard road at times, and you deserve unbelievable credit for the wonderful job that you've done and the hard work and your concern for your students and your parents. So, you know, I really, really appreciate that. You know, one of the things that I like about the opportunity to be able to negotiate this is, I think that it gives both your board and our board an opportunity to show that we can work together in a positive manner to come up with a solution that is amenable to both sides.
Yep.
And I think that that will show how we're moving forward from some of the past practices. And I think that that would be a positive thing if you would be amenable to something like
I
that.
would agree.
Dr. Richard, another? Or, yeah.
The other item would be, have you actually, do you have hard numbers yet on what would be the difference if you were to combine the two, and I understand taking both of those bonds and putting them together and refinancing, the difference between a 15-year versus a 10 versus a 5? Do you have hard numbers on that yet, or and maybe not?
I have way more numbers than I can relay to you. I mean, the bond guys have been giving us all kinds of scenarios. We obviously are not unlike all of us shopping monthly payment a little bit. And what can help us is, honestly, if we can get rated, which we're not quite there yet, but we're getting close. The interest rate gets more favorable if we lock it into a longer term. The other comment I'd make is that we have 22 years left on the original contract, and that original bond's long-term, and so if we can't find an amenable medium here, we'll leave the 22 years alone.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of nice when there is a Plan A and a Plan B.
Yes.
That will work well. So actually getting some of those numbers might be helpful to the board, because if it's a 5% difference from 15 years to 10.
That's not 5.
But whatever that may be, that would probably be helpful there. The other question that I need to ask on behalf of DAC, because I was privy to that conversation, was I know that a year ago this board took on a renewal with another charter school, and at that time we voted 7-0, and they had asked for a longer period, and as a board during the resolution phase, not during the contract phase, we had put in that shorter time. Can we give an explanation for this change in process, or could we give a timeline to Union Colony Elementary so that they have a sense of when they might know the difference between 4 and 15? Because I would imagine that that's an important number for you to have.
Dr. Richards, there's a number of factors involved in the bond refinance. It's not simply rate. Prepayment penalties, lots of different factors. I don't think that you should focus on that detail, other than the fact that you know that it's favorable to us if we can go with one contract, 2 schools, refinance everything into one bonded debt. And if we can't, we can't.
You can always go back.
The existing maturity on the elementary school bonds we'll deal with. It's just a matter of, you would aid us by giving us a longer term contract in that process. I mean, if you want to make the resolution 15 years tonight, we're fine with that.
A couple of those factors.
That was subtle.
That was good.
That answers that.
In simple terms, the idea of combining the contract is the bond purchasers right now for charter schools, what they're looking at is 1,000 kids. And so by combining the 2 buildings, we're really close. We're like 980 or somewhere in that range. So we're right there at that point in time. And so by combining it, we have the student population that allows us then to have a different kind of conversation with the bond sellers. The other thing is, by having the high school being around for 17 years, having a solid record, having financials, having administration that's consistent, those types of things, gives us then the advantage of being able to say Union Colony, the organization itself, has existed for this length of time, which is another factor that the people who are buying these bonds take a look at. They want to know how long and how secure has that school existed. So besides the simple fact of the things that Chris has mentioned, those are just 2 of the kind of factors that combining the contract will help us. If we don't combine it, the high school will stay as is, and the elementary now is a 5-year contract. We'll probably go out and get a very similar rate because it's still a very similar organization, even though it has the same board as a governance piece. The two are not combined into one contract. And so those are kind of some of the simple pieces that we've talked about that would aid us as far as getting a better bond rate.
And I agree. So setting the bond piece aside.
Sure.
If we decide to discuss the length of the term tonight and decide, or if we don't determine the term tonight, when will this come back before the board to discuss the length of the term? Part of that conversation is we have we have a school that has 2 years of priority improvement, and so the question is, how far out as a board do we want to go before we have an in-depth conversation with the applicant again? And we know it's probably somewhere between 4 and 15 years. But when will that come back before the board again, or is there an interest on the board to have that conversation tonight?
Well, I can't answer the second half anyway, but Mr. East has an offer for first and then broader discussion maybe.
I think we would bring it back as soon as, well, first thing I think we do is get information. I mean, you've asked for at least one piece of information, and you've given us a couple, what conditions affect that financing decision, because that is a very big piece of their viability in their contract. So I'd probably, as soon as we can, a week or two, get information back to you to answer some of those questions. The second thing would be, at some point, we would have to put them into a renegotiated new contract and bring them back to you for action. So there'd definitely be time for an in-depth discussion. I'd probably ask you if there are conditions you want to see. For example, around having that conversation you mentioned earlier, more robustly, I think our Union Colony partners would probably agree to have that discussion at whatever depth that you want to have it, and there are opportunities to do that in the contract now. State law requires an annual report. I think that could serve as a entry point for that discussion. But I think between those conditions that give us that discussion and the opportunities the board wants to monitor that, and making their financial viability a part of the new contract, that's what I'd see. So information first, followed maybe as soon as a few weeks later by a revised contract version that, here again, would be a matter for discussion that you could change or approve or disapprove, and the Union Colony Board would have the same right and responsibility to do that too. So I think we're looking at weeks, not months.
So at the next board meeting?
I'm tempted to say yes, we could probably answer questions by the next board meeting. I'm not sure we could have a revised contract ready by the next board meeting.
So is it problematic that you walk away from this meeting tonight not knowing if it's 4 or 15?
No, I believe we can. I believe we can negotiate that. The timeline is the April 27th, 60-day thing for getting the contract done. What's obviously critical to us tonight is your resolution to approve the renewal of the charter, and then authorization as a part of that to combine. But those get woven into the final contract, I believe.
Right.
Just as a side note, there's a $500,000 prepayment penalty on the old bond issue. I mean, there's all kinds of things in the bond deal.
So you don't want to get too far ahead of the
we
game?
may not
don't
want to refinance that one, so
Okay.
you got to do the math on all those numbers, and that's part of our budgeting process each year as a board and a school to figure out how much we got to pay each month, so.
Yeah. Well, I would be remiss in not having the opportunity to say, as I looked back to our conversation 3 years ago, thank you so much for the location that you picked, because it has really made it accessible to that group of students that more reflects our District 6 student body.
Yep.
Thank you for that diversity and your real love for that diversity, and seeing that it actually is a huge benefit to all involved. Now, I do have a list here. The small class size that so many of your parents talked about and valued. Thank you for making a commitment to that, because it's easy to add more students all the way along, and it makes the finances a little easier, but boy, you've really made a commitment to doing that. And then the point-to-point transportation, that vision that you had of those students continuing on, that's made a huge difference. And as always, as you don't, while you're not required by law to have licensed teachers, thank you for making that commitment to having licensed teachers in your school. So really appreciate that.
We're pleased with the way it's going. The diversity was something we wanted to achieve when we went into this, and wanted to land in a part of town that would allow us to do that. And then being able, as Pat mentioned, or we mentioned in the application, be able to transport those peer groups from Evans over to West Greeley, we're confident we'll keep those kids in the program and allow us to get them to college. So.
Mr. Richardson, please.
So regarding the term again, it's more of a question I think maybe for Wayne, is that on if the Union Colony continues to be in priority improvement and that 5-year clock is ticking, if we approve a 15-year term, does that, just like our schools, if we have schools in turnaround or priority improvement, does that clock, how does that relationship work? Are we brought to the table again if 5 years goes by and the improvement isn't made outside of priority improvement?
Just like university schools, they'll get a K-12 rating, and I'm not sure exactly how that will play out. It'll depend on the numbers. So I think that'll change the picture.
But if there was some sort of clear negative trends that lasted for a long period of time, would that?
There would be
the
contract will not get them off of the state timeline if they stay in priority improvement or drop the turnaround. They'll still face the same consequences from the state that any of our regular schools would.
So and not that there's not confidence that won't change and that the improvement rating won't continue to improve. But I just was curious if that perpetuated, then we'd be at the table again, even though the contract might be a 15-year contract. We'd be back talking again.
There are some waivers of state law that are in a part of your agreement now. I'd have to take a close look to see if any of those would affect state action. I don't think they would. No. I think they would be subject to the same consequences as any of our other schools if they stayed on that clock for 5 years. So.
Yes, that's correct. We're not off the hook. If we don't get this thing up and improving and moving in the right direction, then we're on the same consequences as any public school that takes the state money. So we're in that same boat.
Thanks.
Mr. Hall.
I'd like to tag on to what John and Julia said just a little bit, and then expound on a couple thoughts that I have. First of all, I want to be on the record in saying that I think every one of us up here truly believe that Union Colony is an asset to this district.
Thank you.
And is a good thing for our kids. And they're all our kids, right? Yeah. And so, and I truly believe that, or I would not say that. I do believe that you're on the way with the out of priority improvement. Excuse me. And you're making progress. I believe that at this point, what I'm struggling with is two things. Number one, I don't want this board to ever put encumbrances or anything, any obstacles in the way that would unnecessarily burden any of the schools. Okay, we need to be obstacle removers and roadblock removers so that people can get on down the road and get on with what we're doing. But I also want us to be consistent. Consistency is important to me. And as Julia mentioned last year with Westridge, how we did. So I'm not sure that I'm at a point where I can not do what we did last year. And I think the negotiation will bring that out and educate all of us and work it, because the next people that come, or the next situation that comes up, I want to be able to honestly look at them and say, you know how, I want to be consistent.
Sure.
We're not going to literally go in the back room, flip a coin, say, okay, tonight we're going to do this. And so that's very important to me. And I think it's also very important to you and to the future of the district that we establish that. It establishes a level of integrity that you can count upon. I don't know what the number is at this point. I'll be honest with you. But I know at this point, I'm not comfortable extending the term because I don't have enough reason to look at my good friend Scott Renfro in the face and say, this is why we did it. And I think I owe them that. I think we all owe them.
I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that.
Accountability. So I'm not speaking for anybody else up here, but that's where I'm at. So I would really favor if we went into this negotiation and it make it be a win-win and help educate us to where, or give us the tools that we need to make an exception. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, and
Okay.
I appreciate the consistency is important.
And I'm not saying that to burden you guys,
I
because we
think
need
that
to find a way.
it falls on us to make sure we're comparing apples and apples, and I don't know that we are with Westridge, but I appreciate that.
And I'm not saying you are. I just
and-
don't know enough
Sure.
at this point
Sure.
to make an exception that I can justify to the board at Westridge. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
DeSalise.
I just want to thank you for bringing choice into our community. I think the more choices we have for our kiddos, the better. And I'd like to see us keep moving in the direction that we're all supporting kiddos and, not bashing each other and making sure that we're supportive because they're all our kiddos.
Yeah, they are.
I do favor the renewal. I do have a question about the terms,
Okay.
though, as far as the length. I know that it's a little bit different because you already have another school that's been in the district longer than Westridge, and so there's that comparison that's different. But I would like us to talk a little bit more about the length
We can do that.
and maybe bring the numbers. I think that would help us a lot, too.
Sure. We can leave them as is. We can renew and as long as we can renew the elementary charter and operate with a 5-year contract. What we lose is what are certain efficiencies in how your back room operates, how our back room bookkeepers operate. I mean, we got to keep 2 sets of things going all the time. So the part of our reasoning not just bonds, it's efficiencies in how we run the school. So.
Mr. Hall, another comment?
One thing that I did want to mention on this, I think it is of the utmost urgency, and I know that, Wayne, you haven't got anything else to do, but we need to not dally and make this quickly as prudently possible between the two. And so just wanted to get that on the board, or on the record.
Thank you very much. I mean, we appreciate the speed it's operating at right now, so.
Well, I have a couple of comments. First of all, to our DAC, whom I earlier thanked for all their hard work and investment on this process. They're in a position of pointing out where we are in our relationship with the kids of the district, and the learners who are getting the best deal in all of our schools. And so I repeat the thanks to the DAC for the work and the investment of time. And from their point of view, the concern would be, is this length of time something that is maybe worth a review? And obviously you've heard that there are some concerns that way. I guess the way I've seen it is that we're seeing a change in the length of time going from the 30 years to the 15 in a joint, or 4 to 15 in the joint schools. And so I see that as a benefit. I also agree that the slightly shorter length of time makes a lot of sense in a district that has been consistently trying to get a little better contact with charters and making sure that we're all cooperative and on the same page. So I personally have no difficulties in seeing the joining of the schools and certainly being in favor of the renewal. I want to applaud this second thinking now a little bit about the length of time, and we appreciate your relaxed reception of our request to get additional information and allow us to build a little bit of additional information as well. That said, we do have a resolution on the table that involves the contract length. And is that the item that needs to now no longer be considered? And
Well,
Or are we-
we're approving a range, we're not approving a time.
The 4 to 15.
We're approving the contract that we read as.
correct. And
The
there is,
resolution.
To be determined.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody, but I'm just trying to make sure that there isn't
Oh, yeah,
a difficulty in accepting the resolution as read.
With the time to be determined.
With, as read,
As
okay,
read.
so there isn't a difficulty in going ahead with this motion this evening, with the information that we shared about the length of time, and the information that the district and Union Colony will be bringing up to us.
We're okay with the resolution as it's drafted.
Okay,
It
perfect.
allows us the opportunity to negotiate the
Right.
term of the contract.
And allows us to be involved in that
Right.
process, so that all parties are satisfied. Okay.
And thank you, I just wanted to clarify that, so,
All right, we're good?
are we good?
Other comments, questions? Roll call on this resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. DeWitt?
Aye.
Mr. Hayflick?
Aye.
Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Mr. Lydiak?
Aye.
Dr. Richard?
Aye.
Mr. Richardson?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
And the motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very much.